Thursday night. After 2 decades of marriage, my wife, 39 years old, beautiful, the mother of our 2 daughters, and the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, dropped a bombshell that left me reeling. She told me, without much hesitation, that she was planning to go out on a date the next evening with one of her coworkers. Emily and I had been together since we were teenagers. We got married less than a year after we started dating because she became pregnant with our daughter. Back then, we were wild about each other, so we tied the knot, and 7 months later, we welcomed Emily into the world. Our marriage had always been filled with love, or so I believed. We built a life together, raised 2 amazing kids who adored us, and had what I thought was a solid, happy partnership. I poured everything I had into building my landscaping business from the ground up. Over the years, it grew into a multi-million-dollar company, and with it came a lifestyle that was both comfortable and fulfilling. I never once thought I'd hear something like this from her. Her words hit me like a freight train. I sat on the couch with a glass of scotch in my hand, staring at her as she said she'd been struggling with depression and unhappiness ever since the kids left for college. I was blindsided. I'd always seen us as the perfect couple. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but nothing that ever felt unfixable. Hearing this from her out of the blue felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Then she brought up Jack. Jack from accounting. She explained that he'd been there for her, helping her through what she described as a dark and lonely time. I couldn't believe it. Not once had she mentioned feeling depressed, let alone confiding in someone else about it. The idea that my wife had been leaning on another man emotionally, instead of talking to me, cut deep. But it wasn't just that. It was the fact that she wanted to be with him, even if just for one night. Jack, she said, was married to 3 young daughters at home. To me, he wasn't some kind of friend or confidant. He was a predator. A man who knew exactly how to target vulnerable women in complicated marriages. He wasn't a counselor or a hero. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Still, Emily insisted. James, I can't keep this from you anymore. I need you to understand, I have to do this for myself. I know it sounds selfish, but I need just one night to figure things out. I felt like my blood was boiling. My first instinct was to yell, to explode, but I knew better. Emily was stubborn, and when her mind was set, there was no undoing it. Instead, I just sat there, staring at her in stunned silence. She sat across from me on the smaller sofa, visibly anxious, as if she was waiting for me to lash out. But I didn't. I took another sip of scotch, trying to keep myself from shaking, and then got up without a word. Emily trailed after me as I headed toward the bedroom. James, don't ignore me, she said, her voice wavering. Please don't sulk. This is happening, and I had to tell you before anything else happened. I could never cheat on you. I need you to know that. I wanted to be honest because we've always been honest with each other. I turned to look at her, and she must have seen the anger in my expression. Her shoulders hunched, and she pulled her knees up to her chest like she was bracing herself. I didn't say a word. I went to the bedroom, grabbed enough clothes and toiletries to last a couple of days, and shoved them into a bag. As I walked back toward the garage, Emily followed me, practically begging. Please, James, don't leave. It's just one night, one date. I swear, everything will be okay. But I didn't respond. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and drove off without looking back. After 20 years, can't you at least give me that? She'd said, her voice tinged with desperation. But I just shook my head, struggling to process what I was hearing. That same Thursday night, I checked myself into the Ritz-Carlton. Yeah, the Ritz-Carlton. $400 a night, and I didn't care. If I was going to drown in misery, I figured I might as well do it in a place with plush bedding and impeccable service. The moment I got settled, the calls and texts from Emily started pouring in. I wasn't in the mood to play along, so I fired off a single response before blocking her number. My message was blunt: don't contact me. I'll be back Saturday after you've had your little date. I knew my words would sting, but honestly, that was the point. By Friday morning, I was fully in action mode. At work, I told my secretary to block any calls from Emily. I also gave security explicit instructions not to let her pass the front desk under any circumstances. I'd made my decision, and nothing was going to derail my plan. You see, I'm James Thompson. People know me as the guy who gets things done. At work, my reputation is solid. I follow through, no matter what. With my friends, I'm dependable, someone they can always count on. But at home? I'd always been the laid-back guy, the one who smoothed things over and kept the peace. I'd kept my so-called macho side in check for the sake of harmony, and for 2 decades, I thought that approach was working. Now, though, I realized I'd been too accommodating, too complacent. I treated Emily like royalty because I loved her. But looking back, I couldn't help but recall a quote I'd once laughed at: "Treat her like a queen, and she'll treat you like a servant." At the time, I thought it was a joke, something bitter men said to console themselves. But now, those words felt disturbingly real. And let me tell you, I wasn't about to accept that as my reality. Later that morning, I called my brother, Jack, a detective in Miami. If anyone could help me, it was him. I laid out the situation, keeping my tone steady even though I was boiling inside. Jack didn't need much convincing. He immediately reached out to one of his contacts, a private investigator named James Foster. "James, it's Sergeant Walker," Jack said as he dialed the number. "I've got a favor to ask. It's urgent. My brother needs someone to tail his wife tonight. We need everything on this guy she's meeting: address, phone number, photos, you name it. Can you make it happen by Saturday morning?" I listened carefully as Jack coordinated the plan. "James, send me Emily's address and the time she's leaving," Jack said. "I'll make sure James knows where to start. You mentioned the guy's name is Jack, right? Works at Brokers Unlimited? Shouldn't be too hard to track him down." Jack hung up, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. There wasn't much time to lose, so I moved on to the next part of my plan. While Emily was off having her dinner with Jack, I intended to pay Jack's wife a visit. She deserved to know what was happening, and more importantly, where her husband was spending his evening. But I wasn't done yet. My next call was to Nick, an old friend who'd been through his own messy divorce. Nick was a no-nonsense guy, and after everything he'd been through, he'd sworn off marriage altogether. Instead, he relied on an escort service to meet his needs. No strings attached, no drama. I never thought I'd say this, but in that moment, I understood his perspective. "Nick," I said when he picked up, "I need a favor. Can you give me the number for that service you use?" He didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, man. I'll text it to you in a minute. What's going on? Let's just say I'm starting to see things your way," I replied, my voice laced with bitterness. No cheating, no lies, just a business transaction. At that moment, it seemed a hell of a lot simpler than dealing with an unfaithful wife. The call went smoothly, and before long, I had arranged a night out with a young, striking blonde. To sweeten the deal, and given the unique circumstances, I threw in a $1,000 tip. I wanted everything to be perfect. I explained to her that I was looking for a girlfriend experience, where she'd act as though we'd been a loving, long-term couple. The instructions were crystal clear: no drama, no awkwardness, and absolutely no hint that she was an escort. If Emily showed up, and I was counting on it, the girl needed to play her part flawlessly, as though we just met by chance and hit it off. If Emily was going to have her date, I was more than ready to match her energy, but I planned to do it with a touch of class. The plan was simple: meet at a hotel bar, have a drink, chat, and let the evening unfold naturally. I wasn't out to start a scene, but I wanted Emily to know that two could play this game. Meanwhile, Emily had her own routine. Every Saturday, she had an open house scheduled for her real estate business, and she rarely made it home before 6 p.m. This weekend was no different. Flashing back to that fateful Thursday night after our confrontation, Emily had stayed behind, simmering on the couch. The empty room bore the brunt of her frustration as she muttered angrily, "I can't believe how childish she's acting. Just walking out like that without even saying a word? What a jerk." Her irritation only grew as she tried calling and texting me, only to be met with silence. Then, finally, a single text came through. It was brief, sharp, and cut straight to the point. I wasn't coming back until Saturday because of her betrayal. The word betrayal made her stomach turn, forcing her to confront the weight of her choices. At first, Emily tried to brush it off, rationalizing it in her head. To her, it wasn't really cheating, just one harmless night out. It's just for fun, she thought, trying to convince herself. James will get over it. We'll be fine. He's just overreacting like he always does. By tomorrow night, everything will be back to normal. He can't stay mad at me. I know how to fix this. By Friday night, Emily came home to an empty house, and for a brief moment she hesitated. Should she go out with Jack as planned, or cancel the date and call me, asking me to come back? She considered her options but ultimately decided to go through with it. She was looking forward to an exciting evening, something to shake off the monotony she claimed had been weighing her down. She drew herself a warm bath, letting the soothing water help her relax as she mentally prepared for the night ahead. Afterward, she meticulously shaved her legs, applied a rich, fragrant lotion, and sat at her vanity. Piece by piece, she transformed herself into the picture of seduction. The sultry reflection staring back at her brought a small, satisfied smile to her lips as she finished styling her long hair. She admired her handiwork, feeling confident and ready for the night ahead. She carefully removed the tags from a short, provocative dress she had bought specifically for the night and hung it on the mirror. Next, she slid on a pair of sheer black stockings she never once considered wearing for James, and fastened them to a brand new garter belt she had picked up earlier that day. As she adjusted the straps, a memory crept into her mind unbidden. She thought of all the times James had asked her to dress up sexy, hoping to spark something exciting between them. One memory stood out, a Valentine's Day years ago when James had surprised her with an expensive lingerie set from Victoria's Secret. Instead of embracing the gesture, she had accused him of thinking she was a slut, and flat out refused to wear it. The guilt hit her like a wave as she stood there, realizing she was now willingly dressing provocatively for someone else. For a fleeting moment, she questioned her choices, standing still and staring at her reflection. But just as quickly as it arrived, the guilt was shoved aside. She had already made up her mind, and there was no turning back. Emily slipped into the silk dress, the cool fabric gliding over her skin, and zipped it up carefully. Deciding to forego a bra, she admired the results in the full-length mirror. The dress clung to her curves, accentuating her long legs, her high heels adding the perfect touch of elegance. Her breasts shifted subtly beneath the fabric, and the faint outline of her nipples was visible. She tilted her head and smirked. Wow, I look like such a little slut, she thought, a rush of excitement buzzing through her. This is going to be so much fun. Jack won't know what hit him. Even as she enjoyed her reflection, Emily made an effort to set boundaries in her mind. No sex tonight, she told herself firmly. Just dinner and maybe some dancing. She tried to justify the evening as harmless, nothing more than a casual date. But deep down, Emily felt the pull of something more dangerous. The anticipation of this night had consumed her for weeks, and now it was finally happening. Despite James's immature reaction, as she called it in her head, Emily was determined to enjoy the evening. She believed he would eventually come to understand and let her have this one indulgence. He always had. That's one of the reasons she loved him, his ability to accommodate her, no matter what. As she was putting the finishing touches on her look, her phone lit up. It was James. She froze for a moment, feeling a pang of nervousness and guilt. She'd just been marveling at her reflection, fully aware her intentions weren't as innocent as she wanted to believe. But at the same time, she desperately needed to hear from him. Maybe, just maybe, this call could make him understand and accept what she was doing. With a deep breath, she answered, her voice soft and laced with mixed emotions. James, thank you for calling. I miss you so much, and I love you, she said, trying to sound sincere but knowing her words carried a hint of desperation. When are you coming home, baby? James's voice on the other end was heavy, a mix of heartbreak and determination. Hi, Emily. I love you too. That's why I'm calling. I miss you so much, and it's killing me to think about what you're planning tonight. He paused for a moment, as though bracing himself, and then continued, his voice cracking slightly. I'm begging you. Don't go on this date. Please stay home, and I'll come back. I'll do whatever it takes to make you happy, anything you want. Just don't do this. If I'm not enough, tell me how to fix it. I'll do anything. I just want to be with you, Emily. Please cancel this date. Don't throw us away. Let's save our marriage. James pleaded, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. Hearing his desperation made Emily pause, a flicker of guilt surfacing. But alongside that guilt was something darker, a sense of control she hadn't felt in years. James's vulnerability, his deep, unconditional love, gave her a twisted sense of power. She believed he would eventually forgive her because their history, their children, and his unwavering love were too strong to break. She was convinced this was just a bump in the road. "Oh, James," she began softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "I love you so much. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. This isn't about us or our love. I need to do this tonight. It's something impulsive, something for me. Please try to understand. It's just one night. Dinner and some drinks with a friend, that's all. Nothing is going to happen, I swear. I'll be home tomorrow, ready to be your wife again. I promise." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. "I know this hurts you, and I'm sorry for that. But James, you're making too much of it. Trust me. Everything will be fine. I love you. Please, just give me this one night." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she finished, and she hesitated before ending the call. James's quiet, heartbroken pleas still echoed in her ears. Wiping her tears carefully so as not to ruin her makeup, she turned back to the mirror, her reflection staring back at her. "I know he probably thinks I'm being a selfish bitch, but I need this. James, I'm sorry. Please don't hate me," she thought to herself. With a deep breath, she adjusted her hair, smoothed out her dress, and spritzed on her favorite perfume. She forced James from her mind as she prepared to leave, focusing on the night ahead. Back at the Ritz-Carlton, James sat on the edge of his hotel bed, staring at his phone. The call had ended, but her words echoed in his mind, cutting deeper with each replay. She had essentially told him there was no stopping her, and everything would somehow be fine tomorrow. The anger he had suppressed during the call now surged to the surface. He clenched his fists, his heart pounding with a mix of rage and helplessness. The realization struck him hard. He had lost her. The woman he had adored for over 20 years, the only woman he had ever truly loved, was slipping away. Grief began to creep in, overtaking his anger, as he dropped his head into his hands. Meanwhile, James, the private investigator, sat in his white van parked inconspicuously across the street from James and Emily's home. He had arrived early, waiting for Emily to make her move. Sure enough, at 5 p.m., he watched her car pull into the garage. An hour later, another car arrived, stopping in the driveway. James grabbed his camera and snapped photos as a man stepped out of the vehicle. He made note of the license plate, ran a quick check through his contacts, and within 10 minutes, he had everything he needed. He fired off a detailed text to Walker and James, attaching the information and a couple of discrete photos of Jack as proof. James' phone buzzed with the incoming message, and he stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The pieces of his plan were falling into place. The home phone number and address were delivered to Walker and James' phones before Emily and Jack had even left the house. When Jack entered, he noticed the sadness in Emily's eyes. It was a look he'd seen before, hesitation and guilt mixed with insecurity. Women in these situations often question themselves, and Jack knew how to handle it. He saw her doubt as an opportunity. "It's okay, Emily," he said softly, his voice full of understanding. "We don't have to do this. I completely understand. You're feeling torn, and that's normal. Your husband's reaction makes sense. He wants to protect you. If he only knew how much I respect and care for you as a friend, he might not feel so threatened." Jack's words were calculated. His calm demeanor and reassurance were exactly what Emily needed to hear. "I'm disappointed we can't spend the evening together like we planned, but I get it," he added with a shrug. "How about this? Let's just grab dinner, no strings attached, and I'll drop you home right after. It's just two friends having a nice meal. That's harmless, right?" His casual tone put Emily at ease. The way he downplayed the situation reassured her that this was fine. Besides, she was already dressed, and deep down, she was still excited for the evening. At 7 p.m., James, stationed across the street in his van, watched as the couple drove off toward a downtown restaurant. He texted Walker and James the location, then tailed them, snapping photos discreetly throughout the evening. James caught every detail, their smiles over dinner, their hands touching across the table, and Emily leaning closer to Jack as they laughed together. At 9 p.m., they left the restaurant and headed to a dance club. James followed, blending into the crowd to get more shots. Inside, the scenes unfolded like a dagger to James' heart. James captured Emily and Jack dancing closely, their bodies pressed together. His camera clicked as Jack's hand lingered on her back, slid down to her waist, and even brushed her thigh. By the time they shared a lingering kiss under the club's dim lights, James had all the proof James needed. Throughout the night, James sent updates to Walker and James, including photos and videos. By sunrise, every intimate moment had been documented and forwarded. At exactly 8 p.m., after steeling himself, James picked up his phone and dialed Emily's father, David. Their bond ran deep. Years of golfing together had made them close friends as well as in-laws. But tonight, James had no choice but to break the news. "Hi, David, it's James," he began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "James, hey. Are we still on for golf this Sunday?" David asked cheerfully. James hesitated, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'm not sure. I've got some bad news." "Bad news?" David's tone shifted, concern replacing his earlier joviality. "David, your daughter is out on a date with a coworker," James said bluntly. "I thought our marriage was fine, but she told me she needed something more and started seeing this guy. I wanted to tell you directly because I respect you and Linda. But I can't overlook this, David. She's breached our prenup. I consider our marriage over." There was silence on the other end before David spoke, his voice full of disbelief. "James, are you sure? This doesn't sound like Emily. Are you absolutely certain?" "I am, David. I hired a private investigator. He's watching them right now, and I've seen the photos. While we're talking, she's with him, dancing, kissing, betraying me, our marriage, and even our kids." James' voice broke slightly as he finished. David exhaled deeply, the weight of James' words sinking in. "James, I'm so sorry. Please don't do anything rash. I know she loves you. Maybe there's still a chance to work this out." James shook his head, though David couldn't see it. "I'm done, David. I've done all I can. I just thought you should hear this from me first. I'll call you soon. Let's plan for next Sunday. I'll need the distraction after this weekend." David's voice cracked as he responded. "I'm so sorry, James. I really am." James ended the call and sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The weekend wasn't over, but his marriage was. After receiving Jack's address from the investigator, James drove 20 minutes to his house, his grip on the steering wheel tightening with every mile. When he rang the doorbell, a woman in her early 30s opened the door, her puzzled expression meeting his serious gaze. "Are you Mrs. Carter? Jack's wife?" James asked, his voice steady but strained. "Yes, I am. Is everything okay with him?" she replied, concern flashing across her face. "He's fine. Don't worry about that," James said. "He works with my wife, and I need to talk to you. May I come in for a moment?" Olivia hesitated but stepped aside to let him in. They moved to the living room, where she gestured for him to sit on the couch. She sat across from him, her expression growing more uneasy as she noticed the tension in his demeanor. "Mrs. Carter," James began, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but right now, your husband Jack and my soon-to-be ex-wife are on a date." Olivia froze, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. "Are you sure this is the right Jack? My husband usually plays cards with his buddies on Friday nights." James sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't certain. I hired a private investigator. He's watching them as we speak. I have photos and videos if you need proof, But I felt you deserved to know the truth directly from me. Olivia's face crumpled as the gravity of his words sank in. My Jack? And your wife? She whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. James nodded. I know how hard this is to hear. I'm sorry you're caught up in this. I couldn't let you stay in the dark. Her tears fell silently as she struggled to process the betrayal. James felt a pang of guilt for being the bearer of such devastating news, but he knew it wasn't his fault. He offered her a tissue from a box on the coffee table, his heart heavy as he stood to leave. I'll let you have some space, he said softly. I wish this wasn't the way things turned out. I really am sorry. As he left Olivia in tears, James couldn't shake the weight of the situation. Another marriage might be on the brink of collapse because of Jack's actions, and he hated that he had been the one to deliver the blow. The following morning, James sat in his hotel bed, a steaming cup of specialty coffee in hand. For a brief moment, the rich aroma provided a small comfort. But that comfort evaporated as he unlocked his phone and opened the private investigator's latest updates. The images of Emily and Jack's night out hit him like a punch to the gut. Despite the investigator's confirmation that Emily had returned home by 1 a.m. and there hadn't been any sexual activity, the photos and videos were damning. They showed Emily smiling at Jack over dinner, dancing with him, their bodies pressed together, and worst of all, kissing passionately on the dance floor. James' stomach churned as he watched the video of Jack's hands roaming over Emily's backside. His wife's stockings, ones he had given her months ago, stood out like a cruel reminder. He remembered the night he'd gifted them to her, only for her to dismiss them with indifference, making him feel foolish for trying to add a spark to their marriage. And now, here she was, flaunting those very stockings for another man. The betrayal cut deeper than he thought possible. Tears streamed down James' face as he replayed the video for the third time, his heart breaking all over again. He had experienced loss before, his mother's death, the passing of close friends, but this pain was different. This was the agony of betrayal from the one person he had trusted with his entire heart. As the video played again, he paused it on the frame of Jack's hand groping Emily. Anger bubbled up, overtaking his grief. You're going to pay for this, he muttered through clenched teeth, his voice echoing in the empty room. Though the investigator confirmed there had been no sex, James knew the line had been crossed. Her actions were deliberate, disrespectful, and unforgivable. She had betrayed not only their marriage but also his trust and love. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. A choice she had made knowing full well the consequences. James stared at the ceiling, the bitterness and anger surging inside him. This was no longer about salvaging their marriage. This was about reclaiming his dignity and putting an end to the pain. On Saturday afternoon, James met Chloe at the hotel at 2 p.m. Over the next 2 hours, they got acquainted, sharing drinks and conversation. James had been clear about his intentions, and Chloe, with her confidence and easy charm, seemed like the perfect fit for his plans. By 4 p.m., they arrived back at James' house. At 5 p.m., they were in bed together. But before joining her, James took a moment to place a note on the front door, a final message for Emily. The note read, Emily, last night you broke our marriage contract and wedding vows, not to mention my heart. Since you decided to break that contract, I no longer consider us married. Yes, legally we're still bound, but our emotional and moral contract is over. From now on, we're both free to do as we please. I plan to take the master bedroom, as this is my home. You're welcome to use any other room in the house, but my bed is no longer yours. Your clothes and belongings are in the guest room. Please respect my personal space. You wanted your freedom, now I have mine. I hope you're happy with your decision and your new life. Love, your ex-husband, James. He removed his wedding ring, placed it on top of the note, and with a dramatic flourish, took one of his collector knives. He cut through the ring and the letter, then stabbed the knife into the wooden door, a chilling and symbolic act of finality. By 6:10 p.m., when Emily returned from work, the sight on the front door froze her in place. The knife, the letter, and the severed wedding ring created an unsettling image, one that sent shivers down her spine. Her breath quickened as she cautiously approached the door, scanning her surroundings. She pulled the knife out of the door, grabbed the letter and ring, and read the note with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her face as she absorbed James' words. "James!" she cried out, rushing into the house. Her voice echoed through the empty, dimly lit hallway. The silence was deafening, except for faint, muffled sounds coming from upstairs. Her heart pounded as she climbed the staircase, dread pooling in her stomach with each step. Standing outside the master bedroom, Emily strained to hear the noises. They were rhythmic, unmistakable. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open. What she saw made her world crumble. A young, attractive woman was straddling her husband, her body moving with practiced ease, her large breasts bouncing with each movement. For a moment, Emily stood in stunned silence, unable to process the scene before her. Then rage overtook her. "How could you bastard?" she screamed, her voice shaking with anger and heartbreak. James barely flinched. Chloe paused for a moment but quickly resumed, smirking as Emily turned and bolted out of the room. Tears blurred her vision as she fled the house, her emotions a volatile mix of humiliation, fury, and devastation. She drove aimlessly at first, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Eventually, she found herself at her sister Rachel's house. When Rachel opened the door, Emily collapsed into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I caught him, in bed, with another woman," Emily choked out between sobs. Rachel guided her inside, helped her to the couch, and handed her a glass of water. Once Emily had calmed down enough to speak, she recounted everything: the note, the knife, and the devastating scene in their bedroom. Rachel's face twisted with disbelief. "James? Are you sure? This doesn't sound like him at all. Of all people, I never thought he'd cheat on you. He's always treated you with so much love and respect, more than any man I've ever known. I was always a little envious of how he doted on you. What happened, Emily? What could have caused this?" Emily wiped her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. Maybe it's because I went on a date last night. That's the only thing I can think of." Rachel's eyes widened in shock. "You went on a date? With who?" Emily hesitated, guilt washing over her. "Just a guy from work. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I don't know. I made a mistake." Rachel sighed deeply, shaking her head. "Oh, Emily. This is a mess." On Saturday afternoon, James met Chloe at the hotel at 2 p.m. Over the next 2 hours, they got acquainted, sharing drinks and conversation. James had been clear about his intentions, and Chloe, with her confidence and easy charm, seemed like the perfect fit for his plans. By 4 p.m., they arrived back at James' house. At 5 p.m., they were in bed together. But before joining her, James took a moment to place a note on the front door, a final message for Emily. The note read, "Emily, last night you broke our marriage contract and wedding vows, not to mention my heart. Since you decided to break that contract, I no longer consider us married. Yes, legally we're still bound, but our emotional and moral contract is over. From now on, we're both free to do as we please. I plan to take the master bedroom, as this is my home. You're welcome to use any other room in the house, but my bed is no longer yours. Your clothes and belongings are in the guest room. Please respect my personal space. You wanted your freedom, now I have mine. I hope you're happy with your decision and your new life. Love, your ex-husband, James." He removed his wedding ring, placed it on top of the note, and with a dramatic flourish, took one of his collector knives. He cut through the ring and the letter, then stabbed the knife into the wooden door, a chilling and symbolic act of finality. By 6:10 p.m., when Emily returned from work, the sight on the front door froze her in place. The knife, the letter, and the severed wedding ring created an unsettling image, one that sent shivers down her spine. Her breath quickened as she cautiously approached the door, scanning her surroundings. She pulled the knife out of the door, grabbed the letter and ring, and read the note with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her face as she absorbed James' words. "James!" she cried out, rushing into the house. Her voice echoed through the empty, dimly lit hallway. The silence was deafening, except for faint, muffled sounds coming from upstairs. Her heart pounded as she climbed the staircase, dread pooling in her stomach with each step. Standing outside the master bedroom, Emily strained to hear the noises. They were rhythmic, unmistakable. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open. What she saw made her world crumble. A young, attractive woman was straddling her husband, her body moving with practiced ease, her large breasts bouncing with each movement. For a moment, Emily stood in stunned silence, unable to process the scene before her. Then rage overtook her. "How could you, you bastard?" she screamed, her voice shaking with anger and heartbreak. James barely flinched. Chloe paused for a moment but quickly resumed, smirking as Emily turned and bolted out of the room. Tears blurred her vision as she fled the house, her emotions a volatile mix of humiliation, fury, and devastation. She drove aimlessly at first, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Eventually, she found herself at her sister Rachel's house. When Rachel opened the door, Emily collapsed into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I caught him, in bed, with another woman," Emily choked out between sobs. Rachel guided her inside, helped her to the couch, and handed her a glass of water. Once Emily had calmed down enough to speak, she recounted everything: the note, the knife, and the devastating scene in their bedroom. Rachel's face twisted with disbelief. "James? Are you sure? This doesn't sound like him at all. Of all people, I never thought he'd cheat on you. He's always treated you with so much love and respect, more than any man I've ever known. I was always a little envious of how he doted on you. What happened, Emily? What could have caused this?" Emily wiped her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. Maybe it's because I went on a date last night. That's the only thing I can think of." Rachel's eyes widened in shock. "You went on a date? With who?" Emily hesitated, guilt washing over her. "Just a guy from work. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I don't know. I made a mistake." Rachel sighed deeply, shaking her head. "Oh, Emily. This is a mess. My emotions are controlled by pain now," James continued, his voice steady but cold. "And it would take a miracle for me to ever want you back. You're the smartest one in the family, Rachel. I can't believe my sister thought you'd be okay with her dating someone else. What a fool." "Be patient, James," Rachel responded softly. "Remember that she loves you. I just hope she didn't go too far with that idiot." "Goodbye, Rachel," James replied, his tone final. "Let her come home when she's ready. But as for me, I'm done." "Bye, James," Rachel said, her voice breaking slightly. "You're my favorite son-in-law, you know that? I know I love you." The conversation ended there, and James couldn't shake the bitterness that had been growing inside him. Sunday afternoon arrived, and James had just returned from the gym, sweaty and exhausted. As he pulled into the driveway, his gaze fell on Emily's car, parked in its usual spot. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her face trying to hide the tension beneath a weak smile. "You know we're not getting a divorce, right?" Emily said, her voice faltering. "We can work this out. We love each other." James didn't respond immediately. He grabbed his coffee cup, took a sip, and then sat down across from her. Emily nervously fidgeted with her hands, avoiding eye contact. After a few moments of silence, James finally spoke. "Emily, I'm okay with whatever happens. Divorce or not, it doesn't matter to me anymore." His voice was steady, devoid of the passion that used to fuel their arguments. "You broke our prenup, so as far as I'm concerned, our marriage is over. I don't see us as a couple anymore, and you're free to be with whoever you want, just like I am. The only difference now is that you won't be sleeping in my bed, and we won't be sexually involved." Emily's eyes widened. "James, he's not my boyfriend. Nothing happened." James' gaze didn't waver. "Emily, you went out with a man who wasn't your husband. You dressed provocatively, had dinner, held hands, let him touch you, kissed him, and spent time with him. To you, maybe it's nothing. But to me, it's everything. That's what ended our marriage." Emily's lips trembled as she fought to keep her composure. "I don't want a divorce, James. Just give us some time, and I'll be back in your bed." James laughed bitterly. Now that's funny. You broke our prenup, not me. You ended our marriage the moment you agreed to go out with him. You set me free the moment you left with him. I'm not stopping my time with Chloe. She's young, sexy, fun, and the best lover I've ever had. Honestly, it's the best sex I've ever experienced. We did things you never offered me, and now I know what I was missing. He leaned forward, his voice lowering with cold intent. Why would I give that up? And by the way, Emily, while you were out with your date, I paid a visit to his lovely wife, Olivia. Did you know they have 3 beautiful children? But never mind. I'm sure you didn't consider that while you were with your lover. Anyway, James continued, his tone steely, Olivia told me something interesting about Mr. Nice Guy. You're the 3rd woman he's been caught with in the past year. The last one was Samantha Clark from your office. She's the reason for his divorce. Jack's got a long history, but Olivia's done with him. She believes that once a cheater, always a cheater. I think you're in that category now. He paused, his eyes narrowing. I think you could have found a better lover to cheat with, but I wouldn't know. Sounds like you and Jack managed to ruin 2 families with 5 kids. Great job. Emily stood frozen, her mind racing. The truth about Jack hit her harder than she expected, leaving her speechless. The weight of her actions, and the realization of her lover's history, was crushing. She opened her mouth, but it was hard to form the words through the knot in her throat. James, he's not my boyfriend, she said through gritted teeth. You have to stop saying that. Her voice cracked as her anger spilled out. I can't believe you went to her house and told her he was cheating. My God, it was just dinner. Just dinner? James repeated with a sneer. Have you forgotten about the dirty dancing, the kissing, and the touching at the club? It's all there, Emily. I promised Olivia copies of everything, photos, videos, everything. She'll have the proof when Jack tries to deny it. He leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. You think it's not cheating? Let me tell you something. Betraying your marriage by being with someone else? That's exactly what it is. When are you going to understand that? Emily's face flushed with fury. So, you think I'm cruel and hurtful? What do you call what you've been doing? She was shaking with frustration now, her voice rising. Loving and caring? James' response was calm, almost too calm. No. I'm not giving up my time with Chloe. If you can't handle that, you don't have to stay. No, James, Emily said, her voice desperate. I want you to stop seeing her. Be with me again. I promise I won't see anyone else. Oh, you promise? James chuckled, though there was no humor in it. Funny how your promise to be my wife, to forsake all others, turned out to be worthless. You're the one who broke everything, Emily. If you don't like this arrangement, then you're free to leave. Or maybe you can move in with your lover. He's going to need a place to stay too, right? You two deserve each other. He stood up, crossing his arms as he looked down at her coldly. Well, you could always stay here, or maybe move in with your sister Rachel. I'm sure she'd be thrilled to have you. You'd be a great role model for her girls. Emily's face twisted with hurt, but she tried to hold on to her dignity. James, are you really going to stop seeing her? Don't you love me? Don't you want us to be together again? James shook his head, his expression unreadable. It's too late for that. The moment you told me you wanted to be with another man, you destroyed everything. Do I still love you? Yeah. But my trust in you is shattered. How can I trust and love someone who so easily walked away from our marriage? No real man would tolerate his wife being with someone else, but you did it anyway. You made it clear you were going to be with him, regardless of what I felt. Now you need to face the consequences of that. He took a step closer to her, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I want to be with Chloe. A young, sexy woman who gives me things I never knew I was missing. Seeing me with her must be hard for you, but now you know some of my pain. Payback's harsh, but you brought this on yourself. As for divorce, that's your call. I've made my choice. We can live together as housemates and see how things go, or you can agree to the divorce, and I'll have the papers ready in a week, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. Emily understood the gravity of my words. There was no negotiating. For the next month, I brought Chloe home every weekend. We spent the time in bed, multiple times a day, and it felt exhilarating. Chloe made me feel good about myself again, restoring the confidence Emily's betrayal had shattered. Emily hated the weekends. She begged me to stop seeing Chloe, but I didn't relent. Every Saturday night she would leave the house as soon as Chloe and I arrived and wouldn't return until Sunday night after Chloe had gone. I even made her text me after Chloe left. Part of me reveled in the pain I was causing Emily. Every bit of suffering felt like payback for the way she'd betrayed me. But as the weeks passed, that feeling started to fade, replaced by something else: guilt. The excitement with Chloe was physical, purely physical, and I could feel the emotional costs growing. I wasn't getting the satisfaction I'd hoped for. It wasn't enough. One Sunday night, after Emily had returned, I told her, "I won't be seeing Chloe for a while. I'm looking for someone else to be with." Emily's face contorted with desperation. "James, you've punished me enough. Every week, I had to watch another woman come into our home and be with the man I love. The pain is unbearable. I can't stand it anymore. Please, give me another chance. I know I can't compete with a girl like that, but I can give you love and everything no one else can." Her plea took me by surprise. "Love?" I asked, incredulous. "Do you even know what love is?" She flinched as my words cut through her. "Love isn't about turning your back on your spouse and dating other men. You broke that promise the moment you decided to be with someone else. No, I don't think you understand love, and you can't give away something you don't truly possess." I paused, letting the silence settle between us before continuing. "But here's what I'll do. I won't date anyone else until we have counseling. If we can work things out, maybe there's a future for us." Emily leaped off the couch, her arms around me, kissing me fervently. "Thank you, baby. I promise I'll make it up to you." I held her off, though, not letting the emotion carry me away. "Not so fast," I warned, my tone stern. "I'm not forgiving you yet. I'm just giving us one last chance before I make a final decision about your cheating." She looked at me, eyes wide with hope. "James, don't say that. You love me, and I know we'll always be together. Can I sleep with you tonight, please?" She kissed me, her lips desperate. "No, not yet." I could still see the images of her with that other man in my mind. They wouldn't leave, no matter how hard I tried. "Not yet. The memory of you kissing him, letting him touch you, it haunts me constantly," I said, my voice cold with fury. "I'm still furious at you for hurting me and wrecking our marriage. You're lucky our children don't know about this, or I wonder what they'd think of their mother." Emily's face crumpled, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. I was still angry, and the pain was raw. "We'll take our time with counseling. I've made an appointment with Dr. Collins for Tuesday. We'll start the painful process of reliving all of this twice a week for the next 3 months. It's the same therapy you read about in stories, just as painful and tedious. I'll have to revisit the affair, listen to endless discussions about it. Life would have been much simpler if you had stayed true to our vows, but I suppose that was too much to ask." There was a long silence between us. Her guilt was evident, but I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. After 3 months of counseling, we'd made some progress. Emily finally understood the depth of the pain she caused me. She admitted her mistakes, but she still complained about the revenge sex. I reminded her that she had broken our prenup, giving me a free pass to do whatever I pleased. She didn't like hearing that, but she accepted it, though she remained unhappy. The counselor gave me a hard time about my revenge, questioning whether it was healthy or productive. I didn't care. I didn't regret it. I would do it again if I had to. Eventually, I allowed Emily back into the house, but under new terms. I had a post-nuptial agreement drafted. She agreed to forfeit everything if she had any extramarital affairs. She allowed me access to her phone's GPS tracker, her emails, and text messages. She promised complete honesty, and most importantly, she promised to never cheat again. I made it clear that any hint of infidelity, emotional or physical, would result in her being kicked out, no questions asked. "You promised never to let another man flirt with you," I said coldly, my eyes locked on hers. "You're going to remain faithful." That's the only way this works. She nodded, but I could see the resentment in her eyes. Still, she agreed. But I knew this wouldn't be easy. For me, the damage had already been done. Even though Emily was determined to prove her love and commitment, I couldn't shake Olivia's words from my mind. Once a cheater, always a cheater. A year later, things had somewhat returned to normal, but I kept a closer watch on Emily, knowing the possibility of history repeating itself was never far from my thoughts. Her sister, Rachel, and I worked together to ensure Emily stayed on track, though either of us could fully trust her again. Jack's life had taken a sharp downward spiral after his divorce. His wife had kicked him out, taken the house, and was now receiving alimony and child support for their 3 kids. Jack was living in a small, dingy studio apartment, broken after the consequences of his infidelity. Ironically, he'd lost everything for a few dinners, some dancing, and a couple of kisses. What a fool! When Emily learned about Jack's history, how his affairs had cost him his family and future, she was mortified. She realized just how close she had come to destroying her own life, her marriage, and our children's future. Determined never to repeat her mistakes, she committed herself to proving her love to me, to us. Despite her efforts, the memory of that young woman with her husband still haunted her. Emily vowed never to let me stray, never to repeat the same mistakes Jack had made. His story became a cautionary tale, a warning about the high price of infidelity. 2 years after his divorce from Laura, Eric, an unwilling cuckold, confronted Jack outside a pub. Hours later, Jack was found unconscious on the sidewalk, with broken arms, a broken rib, and punctured testicles. Whether Jack would learn from his mistakes remained to be seen, but at least for now, his scars were the only thing he had left. As the saying goes, not one scar on my heart came from an enemy. They came from people who said they loved me,